You're watching Hindustan Times, and I am Aditi Prasad. In focus is the unprecedented level of, the standoff that's happening between India and China at multiple locations in eastern Ladakh. Thousands of Indian and Chinese troops are locked in an eyeball-to-eyeball confrontation along the line of actual control, particularly in the Ladakh sector, following violent clashes earlier in the month that left soldiers on both sides injured. The big question, of course, is about the Chinese motive for this action right now. And I'm joined by former diplomat Veera Shankar, strategic affairs expert Major General Asthana, and HT Hindustan Times foreign editor Pramit Chaudhuri to get some straight answers. Let me start with you, Pramit. Why now? Why at this point right now?
Well, there has been over the past roughly 10 to 12 years, India has been dramatically increasing the border infrastructure across the line of border. It was something that was deeply neglected in the period after the 1962 war, and we've been making a lot of strides to compensate for that. And each time we have been rebuild or expanding this infrastructure. This includes not just roads, but it also incorporates air bases, for example, cruise missile installations, and so on. That's been slowly expanding over the past 10 years. The Chinese have, for obvious reasons, because they've had a much better infrastructure, sought to make it difficult for us, lodge protests, or in some cases, as has happened now, to physically come in. And the specific road here is we've been building a highway over the past roughly 5 or 6 years to the Daulat Beg Oldi position, which is in northern Ladakh region. And that highway is now complete. We have now begun building side roads, if you wish, that allow us to go all the way to our claim areas on the line of actual control, including notably on the Galwan Valley, where we're seeing a large infusion of Chinese troops coming in and confronting us and trying to stop our ability to build those roads. So my sense is that the primary reason is been continuing Chinese attempt to try to stop us from building that infrastructure. Now, what is unusual in this case, however, of course, is that, as you've mentioned, normally these troops, in fact, in the Daulat Beg Oldi, we've had confrontations in 2018 and then nearby in 20, in which the number of involved was probably in the range of 50 to 100. This is really large, and we're not completely clear why the Chinese feel the need to have such an enormous troop presence. Possibly it could be the experience of when they were forced to back down at Doklam, partly because of the rather large Indian mobilization. Or maybe, and this is something we'll have to see as it unfolds over the next week or two, a larger strategic game, in which case we will need to be extremely wary.
Let me get in here, Veera Shankar, at this point. Veera, you've been a former diplomat. You have been you've traveled the waters. You've seen how China behaves in certain situations. What's your opinion? Why is this, between this COVID-19 pandemic that the entire world is facing, China's opened multiple fronts, not just with India, but also with Hong Kong, with Australia, with Taiwan. Why do you think China is behaving in this sort of what some would describe as a bully in this situation? Ma'am, you'll have to unmute yourself. I think you're muted.
Okay, we can only speculate as to the reasons for Chinese behavior. I think one is that they sense an opportunity to assert their dominance in Asia, particularly with countries which have been a bit problematic or where they've had disputes, because they see that the US and the rest of the world are very preoccupied with their own internal issues, the pandemic, and then politics, with an election looming in the United States. So perhaps China senses this as an opportunity to assert their dominance in Asia. Two, I would say that it's a kind of a signal to countries not to side against China with the US on issues relating to the pandemic or
Right.
Taiwan or other issues where, because there's a lot of suspicion of China which has emerged all over the world after this pandemic has spread and become global. So China is exerting pressure on countries not to go down that route with the US. Thirdly, I would say that they have internal, whenever they have internal issues, they tend to fall back on nationalism. And particularly under the leadership of Xi, this has been a constant, one of the strong pillars
Right.
of Chinese legitimacy. So, right now, their National People's Congress has been going on. There's been some criticism of Xi's leadership, perhaps, adopting a kind of a strong nationalistic position helps consolidation of leadership. We've seen this in 62 also, when one of the reasons for the Chinese behavior was Mao's leadership coming into question after the failure of the Great Leap Forward and the many millions of people who died in the subsequent famine in China. And lastly, I would say that, uh, China, I think their earlier diplomacy was subtle. Deng Xiaoping's advice to them was, bide your time and hide your talent. So their diplomacy used to be very low key, but some
Right.
sense that under Xi, a feeling that perhaps China's time has come and there's no longer need to hide your achievements, and the adoption of a more muscular policy overall, which is willing to use the tools of power in pursuit of its objectives.
The pursuit of power in pursuit of its objectives. Major General Asthana, China just a few days ago on, had gone on record on May 26th, the National People's Congress, Xi Jinping called on the People's Liberation Army to be battle ready. Now, do you think that's unusual at this time? Is this muscle flexing, and what Meera is saying, that this is power for this, because they now feel that their time has come and they can start flexing their muscles? Should we read anything into his Xi's call to sort of say that the the PLA should be battle ready at this time?
Uh, as far as Xi Jinping's call to PLA is concerned, it has to be understood in a broader context. He
Right.
is the chairman of Central Military Commission, and when he was talking at that time, what he had in mind was the threat from all over, that is the Indo-Pacific, South China Sea, Taiwan, Hong Kong problem, as well as the face of in Ladakh. So it was not India specific. That is one point I would like to make. The second thing is, I want to put a little bit of background. I agree with both the panelists for the reasons and whatever they have said. Few things for the viewers. Number one, there is no border treaty between independent India and China. The treaty was signed by British India and Tibet. Chinese rep only initialed it, which was later not ratified by China. And therefore, there is no border treaty existing. The line of actual control, we have our own perception of line of actual control, they have their own perception, and these perceptions overlap. And when we go and patrol our area of perception as per the Border Peace and Tranquility Agreement, they call it transgression, and when they do so, it is called as transgression from our side. Now, the difference
Right.
between transgression and face-off, which is the case today, is that during transgression, you go patrol and come back. But in case
Right.
of face-off, you go there, pitch tent and make the bunkers, which is happening now. Now, in this particular case, we have to read this as a transition and a messaging in the manner in which Param had explained in no uncertain terms, that while they had made their infrastructure right up to the LOC as per their perception, now when we want to do it, they want to deny the same to us, and that is why they are putting something like a blocks in that prospect. Second thing is that our troop density has generally been higher in most of these areas on the borders. Their troops normally remain behind, and therefore they are now building up the troop density. It is still not a case of war or a pre-war scenario. The reason being, war does not suit either of the country. War has got different kind of battle indicators. Yes, there are a lot of troops, there are tents, there are bunkers coming up, but that is to sustain for a longer face-off. But when we come to battle or fighting a war, then there are different indicators like movement of guns, stocking of ammunition, and some other battle indicators which have not been picked up so far. So therefore, it's not a case that they want to fight with us as of now. They only want to give us indicators, and the fact that now we are the WHA chairmanship, we have come to India, they were giving subtle messages. Last point I want to make out is that there is a three-stage process of delineation, delimitation, and demarcation of LAC. So long this does not happen, the face-offs have happened in past, will continue. This is not the last face-off. It will continue subsequent as well, whenever our perceptions differ and whenever China wants to give a message to us or otherwise. Yeah, Aditi. I think Aditi has frozen.
She'll come back.
Yeah, Param, you can take it on.
Well, I'll just add to what the general has mentioned, that in the case of the Galwan Valley, the Chinese intrusion is actually into areas that they did not previously contest.
Yeah.
In other words, these were areas that they conceded were actually Indian in the past, but obviously because of their determination not to allow us to build and complete the highway there, they have decided to intrude. In the case of Pangong Tso, what the general described is absolutely correct. This was the areas of finger 4 and between finger 4 and 8 were areas where we mutually patrolled. In other words, India would patrol to the extent of its claim, and China would patrol to its end, and they overlapped. Right now, of course, the Chinese have now said we cannot patrol to the extent that we used to. That is a case of differing perception, very clearly. Galwan Valley is unusual in the sense that this is not a case of differing perception, that this is an area that they have always excited until now as being Indian territory.
Yeah, and I like to add here, I agree with him. I would just like to add, there is a saying by a famous strategist of China, that is Sun Tzu, and he has said, strike when the enemy is weak and preserve when the enemy is strong. Now, China has feeling that perhaps the rest of the world or rest of the contenders to its position are struggling with COVID, and therefore this is an opportunity. So they see it as an opportunity, and that's why they are perhaps trying to make the best of it. And there are other reasons which Meera has also brought out. I need not repeat that.
Yeah, so in the, when you're saying that this could be part of China's geopolitical message, or to flex its muscles, because right now it knows that the rest of the world is sort of in a weak spot. That stands to reason. With India specifically, probably the geopolitical message to India with this border posturing is also that do not take advantage of China's global isolation at this point in time. Would you agree with that, Pramit?
It's hard to tell right now. The understanding I've had in my conversation with the government is that during the pandemic, China actually, in their diplomatic messaging to us, was actually remarkably benign. In fact, almost apologetic about the pandemic. They invited us to the SCO conference meetings, the foreign ministers. They phoned us up regularly. unlike the belligerence that their ambassadors have shown, for example, to Europe or to Australia or definitely to
Right.
America, which is on a different level of hostility, the Chinese at the diplomatic level were actually remarkably calm with us.
Right.
And so there was no signaling from them that they were unhappy with us. And in fact, their overall policy, if you look at what their ambassadors said, definitely in India, we want to work with you together after the pandemic is over, and
Right.
so on and so forth. So one way to look at this, and as I said, this will get clarity over the next few weeks, possibly even months, was that this is independent of what they saw as their larger post-pandemic geopolitical position. However, it is also probably true, as the others have mentioned, that the Chinese feel that they are coming out of the COVID crisis faster than anybody else. Their economy is probably growing faster or will grow faster than anybody else. The
While the
United
others
States
are
is in
tanking.
chaos.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly. And the most countries are negative. They will probably still get, I mean, they haven't given a GDP estimate, but we assume it will be 2 to 3%, if not at least growing faster than almost anybody else. They know that the only country that they see as their peer nation, which is the United States, is in chaos. It's handled the crisis terribly. It's going into a presidential election, as we mentioned, and it has a
Right.
completely dysfunctional president. So therefore, their view is that they can do things now and get away with it without much concern. So they've attacked Australia savagely over the past few weeks,
Yeah.
as you've mentioned. But they've even gone after the Czech Republic, which is a tiny country.
Yeah.
Why would
Exactly.
a superpower want to go after a country of 4 million people or 5 million people? But they've gone after them anyway. It's totally irrelevant to them. It's like we are China now, and it's fine. But my
Yeah.
sense is, and I'm just saying this, given what we have right now, what they're doing on the border with us, that while they feel emboldened by the international system, it's not completely geopolitical. It is really about the fact they do not want those roads to be built because they know that that will give us an enormous advantage. Or they have dominated the border
Right.
geographically, but they faced a setback in Doklam. And if these roads are finished and completed, they will at least be at par with India geographically along these areas, which is something that has not happened for almost over 50 years.
Yeah, we can almost accept, India has to accept that China, of course, will never be a benign force. As far, I mean, it may not be a malignant force, but it's definitely never going to be a benign force as far as India is concerned. And I think, what many experts, what I've been reading, they said that the the Galvan River Valley, the Penong Lake, and other areas, the infrastructure competition along the line of actual control, where for better movement of troops and weapon system, and especially with the completion of the DSDBO road last year, that has sort of triggered off this current crisis. What is your view, Major General Asthana?
Uh, yes, what you're saying is right, but the fact is, as Param mentioned, we also have done a lot of activities to try and catch up because they were already in advantageous position by their
Absolutely.
infrastructure development. Now,
Absolutely.
the fact that we started off major flights to Thais. Imagine we have sent our jet aircraft, the Jet Airways aircraft, that civil airliner. So we developed Thais.
Right.
We are developing ALGs all across. And we are also doing in our own way a fair amount of infrastructure development. Now, as Param mentioned, that this infrastructure development, the basic dominance, and these were the pinprick points which China was counting on, that whenever India diverges slightly, I can use them. Those points will keep getting reduced if all these 73 so-called strategic roads they get built up. Number one. The number two basic important point is that as far as China is concerned, it will be quite uncomfortable if India falls into the, shall we say, into the camp of United States. Till now, as we have seen, even in Quad, India has been slightly reserved in some of the actions. And as far as Indo-Pacific is concerned, we are in favor of free Indo-Pacific, but we haven't shown too much of interest as far as the Quad activities are concerned, although the participation at the foreign minister levels has already been there. But notwithstanding that, they don't want us to fall into that lap, and therefore there is a subtle messaging to India that here is a case because none of the Quad members has got an unsettled border with us. You are the only one who has unsettled border with us. So your reading of situation and your responses to us should be slightly different than others. Now, this is one important message which they want to give, that our hips are joined. So I think we should behave in a slightly different manner.
So going forward, these incidents are likely to recur as India plays catch up on the infrastructure close to the line of actual control in Ladakh and in other regions. What might be a better way to regulate? Because as you pointed out, sir, that at the outset, that this is not the first time it's happened. This is not going to be the last time it's happened because the LAC clarification process is not complete for both sides. How does one tackle China going forward? I'd like to come to Meera Shankar with that question.
Aditi, I think we have agreements for maintaining peace and tranquility on the border. We have no success in terms of either defining the LAC and mapping out the areas of dispute or settling the border itself, despite many
Right,
rounds of talks at the
right.
political. So I suppose we really have to pursue both these. And if you look at this, I mean, partly what Pramit says is true. That is that it's India's efforts to fill the infrastructure gap which had developed on the border, which
Mhm.
the Chinese would like to block or thwart or delay even
Right.
to the extent they can. But I think there's a broader message as well because it's not just India.
So
You
we've
see, it's
lost her.
not just India,
Yeah.
it's also what they've done in the South China Sea, where they have added those islands as administrative districts. And then, what they have done vis a vis Australia, where they have imposed tariffs on Australian exports and threatened them quite substantively. Now, in terms of India, the economic pressure that China can exert is not very high because
Right.
basically the trade balance is so heavily skewed in their favor, and India is the one which exports very little, imports a large amount from China. So the
Right.
levers that they have vis-a-vis India are essentially the border, which remains unopened, where they, can create minor local problems at will of lesser or greater significance when they wish. So I think it's important for the two sides to really look at defining the border. Apart from strengthening the arrangements for maintaining peace and tranquility, uh, which we have tried to go through. We have diplomatic contacts with China right now, and their ambassador to India has made somewhat soothing noises after
Mhm.
President Trump's offer
Mm.
of mediation or
Yes, there is
intervention
that.
or
Yes.
arbitration between India and China. I think probably an unsolicited one,
Yet
which
again.
President Trump is prone to do. But thereafter, you see, the Chinese ambassador to India has said that neither of the countries pose a threat to each other. We should resolve problems through discussion and diplomatic means, and we should not allow, differences to overshadow the relationship. So
Right.
I think that you know both countries. India has said that it will be firm, but the door is always open to diplomatic resolution of the issue. And I think that after some time, both countries will find their way to perhaps resolve this. But the larger question is that we need to either define the reach some agreement on the line of actual control so that you don't have these face-offs. And the larger question is, we really need to resolve the border.
Yes, the eyeball to eyeball confrontation is in the interest of no one really. Major General Asthana, you wanted to come in there.
Yeah, there is a complexity of border problem. I just want to cover that part. Number one, as far as the borders are concerned, the delimitation, and demarcation of LAC, China doesn't want it to happen for the reason because they think that that will become de facto border. Unfortunately, the stands of both the countries have hardened over a period as far as border is concerned. Now, any concession which any country gives on borders, then it can be seen and it can be criticized. The leaders can be criticized. So there is a domestic pressure as far as resolving this border is concerned. Another issue which comes out very clearly is that as far as the borders are concerned, out of 14 countries, they have resolved with 12 countries on give and take principle. Now, in between India and China, so many delegations we have discussed out, the give and take principle is not holding ground for the reason because as far as India is concerned, you don't want to lose an inch of territory, you don't want to give anything. As far as China is concerned, they also want to do the same. So that becomes a tug of war. Secondly, there are strategic interests which has got now ingrained, like the Karakoram highway. Whatever the case may be, they will not like to part with it. Tawang, we will not like to part with it. So stands have hardened. So border is a slightly complicated issue, but what is doable is the demarcation of LAC. That is the three-stage process which I mentioned. Now, in the initial stages, they have we made some success by exchanging the road. They never came back. Exchanging the map, but they never came back. After in some areas like middle sector, we exchanged the map,
Yes,
but they
yes.
never came back. So there are complications, but notwithstanding that, and there are other complications like somebody decided that the border should be around the McMahon line. Now McMahon line itself, when you plot it on a meter map, it becomes 1.5 kilometers. So again, there are
Exactly.
perceptions
So
as
that
to which route you
there
take.
is really,
So,
I mean, if what the sense that I'm getting is that there's really no, I mean, we've been trying to resolve the border dispute with China and to sort of actually earmark the borders. There have been a number of meetings and there have been a number of high-level delegation visits to sort of sort out this mess, but it's not been solved till now. Then there, of course, recently Doklam happened where China was very, very noisy. This incident, China is not being that noisy, but still it's there. There is a confrontation, eyeball to eyeball situation. Going forward, yeah, the entire panel agrees that the border limitations need to be agreed upon by both sides, but that political solution simply does not seem to be in any sight so far. And, till the time that solution comes into place, obviously, it's very, very difficult to sort of say that, okay, this will not happen again in the next 2 months or 1 month or 5 months or 6 months or even in the long term. So, I'll leave this discussion at this point. The idea was to understand why the standoff between China, why suddenly tensions were so high at the border, and in specifically in Ladakh region. Of course, the assessment that our panelists have given us is that largely is to do with the infrastructure development that India has been doing along the border, and of course, China does not see eye to eye with that and never will probably in the near or distant future. Thank you for joining us for this broadcast. We'll keep coming back to you with more updates. Keep watching HindustanTimes.com.